This was the worst Memorial Day box office in decades. So this is Hollywood Reporter. Box office meltdown. Furiosa edges past Garfield to win Memorial Day with worst number one opening in 3 decades. The Memorial Day box office is no picnic this year. Ha ha ha. But it was certainly a roller coaster ride. That's why they pay him the big bucks.
Yeah.
Warner Brothers Furiosa narrowly beat Alcon and Sony's The Garfield movie with an estimated $32 million for the 4-day weekend, with George Miller's latest entry in the Mad Max franchise taking in an estimated $26.3 million for Friday through Sunday versus an estimated $24 million for the animated Orange Feline.
Yeah, that's a bath. That's a bath. You usually have like $100 million opening on Memorial Day with the Spider-Mans and all that shit. Yeah.
Yes, and actually, I don't think it's in this article, but I looked at a couple of articles before settling on this one. I'm pretty sure what I read was there has not been a movie that broke $100 million in its opening weekend the entire year. Even Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes, which they're considering a success, it's just broke even with its production budget now,
right?
And they're calling that a success. So the standard for success, the bar has been greatly lowered, but we'll get into it. Garfield on Sunday claimed victory over Furiosa with an estimated 4-day holiday gross of $31.9 million, but on Monday revised its estimate down to $31.1 million. Warner's took the unusual position of not reporting a 4-day number until Monday. With the race so close and the headlines so bad, it's easy to understand why the studio remained mum. Despite Furiosa's victory, it still came in behind expectations and is the worst Memorial Day number one opener since Casper debuted to $22.5 million nearly 30 years ago in 1995, and that's not adjusted for inflation, according to ComScore. This stat excludes 2020 when theaters were closed during the COVID-19 pandemic. Neither film aced it with audiences, with each receiving a B+ cinema score. I think that line's a little unfair. We'll talk about it, but overall, Furiosa has been pretty well received. With no holdovers to contribute in a massive way to the Memorial Day box office, overall revenue for the 4 days plummeted to an estimated $128.3 million, also a 29-year low and down nearly 37% from last year per ComScore. That excludes 2020 and 2021 when the pandemic was still raging, though Paramount's A Quiet Place sequel was able to open to $57.1 million over the holiday in 2021. So A Quiet Place, which opened while the pandemic was still going on, opened to almost double what Furiosa did on Memorial Day weekend. May has been a brutal start to the summer season as the box office continues to feel the impact of bigger tentpoles being delayed because of last year's labor strikes. Marvel Studios usually kicks off summer over the first weekend in May with a superhero tentpole, and this year it was going to be Deadpool and Wolverine. Marvel and Disney, however, had to push the film, which had to halt production because of the SAG-AFTRA strike, back to nearly 3 months to July 26th. Neither Furiosa nor Garfield were ever considered to be the sort of 4-quadrant tentpole that generally anchors Memorial Day. That means something that appeals to everybody. Last year, for example, Disney's The Little Mermaid debuted to $118 million domestically. Furiosa, a prequel that sees Anya Taylor-Joy play a younger version of Charlize Theron's titular character in the last film, had been expected to open to $40 million to $45 million for the 4-day holiday, but instead is the latest summer event pick to underperform in its launch. An exception was the Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes. In 2015, Mad Max Fury Road started off with a 3-day gross of $45.4 million in mid-May. Miller's new film, which also stars Chris Hemsworth, cost a pricey $168 million to make before marketing. Overseas, Furiosa started off with 32.8 million from 76 markets for a subdued global start of 64.8 million through Monday, meaning it will need strong legs similar to Fury Road if it is to land in the black. So far, it is drawing few females, with males making up 72% of the audience in North America. All right, so you have a few factors going on here. For one thing, and this is what a lot of the articles and commentators in the mainstream press are focusing on, the impact of the strike having delayed all of these movies, which, yes, if Deadpool and Wolverine had opened this weekend, that is almost certainly going to be a big hit, and it would be a different story about the Memorial Day box office. But that wouldn't erase the fact that the entire year has been one disappointing box office after another. What Barbenheimer does not erase the overall trend of movie going post-pandemic. So yes, the strike is having an impact. And Marvel, while Deadpool and Wolverine is kind of a holdover project, Marvel openings are certainly not the guaranteed box office that they once were. So that project you could pretty much guarantee. But the Marvels, anyone? So having a Marvel movie in there is not what it used to be. But hey, times change. Times change, and we're seeing a shift. We're seeing a shift in people's habits. The pandemic got them used to watching things streaming, where they're far less expensive, far more convenient. You're not going to have a crying baby behind you, and
Well, I will.
only if you bring your own.
Yeah.
Yeah, look, for 1,000 years, people went to chariot races, right? Eventually, they stopped going to chariot races. Things move a lot more quickly today, and this pandemic and the fact that, in a way, the movie studios cut their own throats because they went all in on these streaming services and they cannibalized their own business. Now, you could say for them, it's 6 of one, half a dozen of the other in the end, and maybe it is if they can make the same money going to a streaming model as to a film model, but it's basically going to be the end of movie theaters. The distributors cannot afford a business that runs this way. God, man, you go to the movie theaters they have now, to get audiences to come, they got the reclining seats, you got air conditioning, you got to bring a sweater. You know how much it costs to keep one of those places open? Their electric bills alone. So you're going. I think the result is going to be a collapse in the entire movie theater industry. You'll still have a few as a novelty, the way you used to have. You don't really have them very much anymore, but we used to have revival houses before, because VCRs kind of killed the revival house business.
Right.
You still have a couple places
where you get like an old print, right? That's what you're talking about.
That's it. We used to have, you called
years ago, right?
Exactly. That was how I saw Phantom of the Paradise for the first time at Shock Tree. A lot of Fellini movies I saw that way. If you wanted to see those movies before VCRs were common, that was the only way to see them. You had to go to a revival house. Now those, you still have, like, IFC does a mix. They'll do new independent films, plus they'll do some, they'll show Casablanca, right? But that's what you're going to have. You're going to have a few movie theaters, and it's going to be what the revival houses were. It was a novelty to go watch a Gene Kelly movie in a movie theater. Right. So even after VCRs, they held on for a little while because of the novelty value of it. And like I said, you still do have some places that do that as a mix with new movies. That's probably what this is going to become. In terms of the culture war element, I will say this about Furiosa. Okay, so suppose this is the result, and it's well reviewed by all the nerds, like Critical Drinker, Nerdrotic. They all say it's a good movie. None of them are trashing this as a movie. But Hollywood has adopted this political agenda where, instead of, as at one time, you would have had the guy with the cigar would have said, well, you know what I think people really want to see? They want to see a Mad Max movie with Mad Max in it. Am I crazy? There's nobody in the room saying that anymore. They think it's their job to impose this political agenda on people's entertainment. And they had the idea that they could put these messages in, and the names of the franchises would be so powerful that recondition people to absorb these politics through these beloved franchises, and they were wrong. It doesn't really matter if it's a good movie. Who sat in a room, if it was old Hollywood where they sat down and actually thought about what people want to see, which there is really not what they're doing. Why would you pitch a Mad Max movie without Mad Max built around a character that nobody knows or really cares about from a movie that frankly didn't do that well in the first place? Now they pitched originally. I thought this was a really interesting idea when they put in Tom Hardy as Mad Max. Their concept was that Mad Max is like this legend of the post-apocalyptic world being told from the point of view of the people who have established civilization after this phase. Like he's like a folk hero, Mad Max. So they proposed that different people could play Mad Max, and you could tell these very different Mad Max stories, because basically these stories are all like folk tales being told in the world after about this legendary figure, Mad Max. I thought that was a great idea. For whatever reason, they did not follow through with that. So even though it's a good movie, especially because so often they've done this bait and switch where they stick in these female characters to substitute for male characters, the Star Wars trilogy with Rey, classic example, that gave her Luke Skywalker's story, basically. Even if it's good, the fan base are mostly male nerds for these kinds of things. You can see, even with a female protagonist, 72% male. For fuck's sake, the Marvels, where they did everything they could to attract a female audience, had a majority male audience. That's the audience for the fucking genre. And even if it's good, they're not even going to give it a chance because they've been burned so badly by movies that want to preach at them and lecture them that just hearing, oh, they made a female protagonist in a Mad Max movie and Mad Max not in it. Even if it's good, they're not even going to give it a chance to find out if it's good. At best, they're going to wait until it's streaming, right? Which is another element aside from the politics of it. Who's compelled to go see this? Listen, anti-Semitic psycho that he might be, you want a hit Mad Max movie? Bring back Mel Gibson as the aged Mad Max still living out in the wasteland. You're going to have an enormous hit. I mean, the anti-Semites alone are going to give you $100 million opening.
Yeah, exactly. It's funny. With the Mad Max thing, they seem to have been a victim of reading their own press a little too much. Because, like, that movie, Fury Road, that was, what, 7 or 8 years ago at this point. That was a beloved movie by cinephiles. Like, movie lovers love that movie.
And
because
people who had grown up with Mad Max, like me, it was a lot of fun to go back to that world.
Well, it was also just very well done. You had the practical in-camera visual effects and the practical stunts. Like, it was superbly made. I didn't find the movie particularly compelling. Like, I appreciated the craft involved, but I didn't love it, and I think a lot of people who really were attached to that film were, like, real movie enthusiasts, to the point where, like, how in our space certain politicians get these very, devout online followings, and then when ordinary people go vote, we're like, what happened? I thought they were going to do so much better. Kind of like this. Like, Mad Max was very popular amongst a certain niche audience.
Right.
But to put $168 million into a prequel without the main character and then open it on a big holiday thinking it's going to do that kind of numbers, it just wasn't to be.
Right. It was. That's what's really remarkable about this to me. And it really does speak to how Hollywood has gotten out of touch with the idea that they need to actually pay some mind to what people want to see. Right. If you were in a room, just us, we're not professional Hollywood executives, and somebody pitched me, okay, so we're going to do Mad Max, but without Mad Max, built around the prequel story of the female character from Fury Road, which didn't do incredible numbers.
Right.
Who thought putting $168 million into that was a good idea? It's amazing that got greenlit.
I think it's because that movie got all those Oscar wins. It won a lot of technical awards. Like, there was a lot of fanfare around that movie long after the box office haul was in, to the point where people, I think, thought it was more this cultural thing than it actually was. That'd be my guess.
Maybe, but it's in keeping with the overall trend where Hollywood has taken the attitude that they can dictate taste instead of following it.
Right, sure.
Please clap.